The Centurion Project. Written by the 8th Day of Night. Chapter 50. A Canterlot Wedding. Section 3, Part 1. Elias had no frame of reference, having never been to a formal human wedding. But while beautiful and well-coordinated, Elias found the whole ceremony boring. He could understand what they were trying to do, and he listened intently to every word, especially when Bookbinder and Nightflash shared their vows. But in truth, the wedding couldn't hold his interest. When he began to glance around, he was surprised when he found many ponies crying, including Night Sky. She sniffled and wiped her eyes, her makeup staying perfect as she sat and leaned forward in her seat. The sight made Elias look inward, trying to remember the last wedding he had gone to. It had been a simple affair between Bevan and Sarah, and it had been outdoors. They had both been in their Legion armor, and with Tristan acting as minister, their whole community had come together to celebrate with a small feast harvested from their first crop. Their ceremony had taken minutes to complete, after which a simple party had followed. Ponies were much more ceremony. First, Celestia welcomed everyone with a lengthy speech about the magic of friendship and how marriage was just a lifelong friendship between two close ponies. Then the best mare gave a speech about Nightflash and Bookbinder, talking about all their lives together. What should have been full of entertaining stories was mostly just cutesy things or stories Elias had already participated in. He had pushed Nightflash forward, and while he wasn't mentioned by name, the dark blue stallion sent him a happy look. The speech was followed by the exchanging of vows, which were also lengthy and personalized. Then came the rings, another speech from Celestia, and finally the ceremony was over. Elias hated that he almost yawned. Everyone stood as Nightflash and Bookbinder began to make their way back down the aisle together. They both seemed ecstatic and energetic as they pranced down the center aisle, and both shot him brilliant smiles as they walked by, chased out of the wedding hall by a thunderous stomping. Elias remained silent, not knowing if he should clap like a normal human or if he too should stomp. Instead, he merely waited, staying completely still as ponies began filtering out of the pews to follow the newlywed couple out of the wedding hall doors. Elias looked back to Night Sky to find her wiping her eyes and smiling up at him.
"It is simply a wonderful thing when two ponies get married,"
she said.
"It is the ultimate form of friendship, and is a tradition I will never tire of."
Elias nodded and scratched at his chin. "It was a nice ceremony," he agreed. "Makes me curious about a few things." Night Sky snorted and shook her head.
"Oh, Elias, you are so eloquent when it comes to speaking of ceremonial beauty, but I suppose I can share in your bored sentiment."
She raised a hoof when Elias tried to protest.
"I did not mean to insult. I simply observe that look you get in your eyes when something loses your interest. Believe me, I noticed your attempts to remain focused and attentive. You are simply not an individual who likes to remain a bystander."
She slipped off the pew bench and scooped up her saddlebags.
"I think you would have enjoyed one of the ancient wedding ceremonies. The best man was actually the most adept magic user the groom and bride knew, and was there in case any spurned lovers or jealous herdmates decide to interrupt the ceremony."
Night Sky giggled.
"I was once at a wedding where a stallion had 17 herdmates, and he hadn't informed any of them that he was getting married again. To say that Blue Arrow had her work cut out for her would be a great exaggeration."
She sighed longingly as she took Elias's arm, leading them out of the largely empty wedding hall. Only Celestia was left, and Elias could feel her eyes on his back as she talked with Bookbinder and Nightflash's parents. No doubt she was wondering why he wasn't working with his Legion, and as Night Sky continued speaking about the past wedding ceremonies, he couldn't help but to think about it himself. What was he doing? He was on a date with somebody who wasn't even in the same species as him, let alone the same class. Why Luna had given him so much as the time of day was a mystery, and not only was she distracting him from his job, she was distracting him from the job that she had forced him to do. He was supposed to be a soldier, an elite killing machine. He was decidedly not supposed to be watching ponies celebrate their marriage with a princess on his arms. And yet, that's what he was doing as he watched Nightflash chase a shrieking Bookbinder around as the pair waited for their carriage to the reception hall to be brought around. The building wasn't far at all, but from what little he knew of pony marriage, It was traditional for the bride and groom to have taken the carriage to the reception. The fact that he had put any research or thought into the fact worried Elias. Was he being played? Was the Meredith actually a changeling in disguise, making him complacent while his legion was infiltrated under his nose? Elias's bad eye twitched and looked down at night sky. The Pegasus' tail wiggled happily, just like Luna's did whenever she was overly excited. Elias had seen her wiggle her tail exactly 3 times. Twice when she was trying to cuddle him, and once when he had accepted her as his date to the wedding. It was accompanied by a slight scrunch of her muzzle, and her green eyes poked through her illusionary disguise, sparkling happily in the light of the street lamps. Elias felt his throat tighten with nervousness, and as he continued to stare at her from the corner of his eye, he knew that she was the same Luna he had always known. Her smaller, hornless state was just to keep the public eye away. He knew that. She also had promised to enact further measures to ease his concerns about the march. Why would a changeling spy do that? No. The spy would simply draw his thoughts permanently away from the march. The wedding was supposed to last a single night, and then they would bounce back into work with more fervor than ever. So why did he still have a sour feeling in his stomach? Elias didn't know, and he couldn't keep a small frown from his lips as the carriage finally arrived, and Bookbinder Nightflash climbed inside. It began to rumble away, and the cheers of the crowd naturally fell to light chatter as the ponies began to make their way to the reception hall. Elias felt a slight tug on his sleeve, and he looked down the night sky.
"Come along, Grumpy,"
He said with a smile.
"let us get to the reception. I am eager to see if they have any cider."
Elias snorted, but he stayed at her side as they began to walk at a leisurely pace. "You think I'll be able to get anything hard?" he asked absently. "I'm not even 20 yet." Nice guy scoffed.
"Unless Bookbinder specifically ordered the bartender to not give you drinks, I can imagine you'll pass for a much older stallion. Besides, your birthday's in a few weeks, yes?"
Elias eyed at the Pegasus. "A month," he replied. "How do you know?" Night Sky's tail continued to wiggle, and her muzzle curled up in a wider, cuter smile.
"You told me, remember? It was our first real moments together as friends, locked in the castle dungeons."
"We wouldn't have been locked in that cell if you hadn't locked us in there," Elias replied. Night Sky slapped his pant leg.
"Hush you. I eventually realized and took fault for my mistake. It took thorough research to find your lack of magical soul. I couldn't have possibly known that other worlds truly have no manifestation of magic. It is unnatural."
"Says the talking pony to the talking monkey," Elias muttered. Nice Guy conceded the point with an incline of her head, and they fell into a comfortable silence. They continued to follow the crowd as they made their way to the reception hall. The building wasn't as ornate as the wedding hall. In fact, it looked to Elias that it was merely a space that would cater to any kind of large party. It stood at 4 stories high, and the outside was an unremarkable white, decorated with lamps and flowers. Elias let Night Sky guide him towards the door, and his eyes took in the roomy interior of the building. The ceiling was relatively tall, and was decorated with a series of chandeliers that held dimly burning candles. Half the hall was empty, and Elias spotted a large pair of speakers with a sound system sitting idly between them. No doubt it was some sort of dance floor. The walls were decorated with a myriad of whites and blacks, and as Night Sky nudged him towards a table with their names on it that sat close to the bridal party table. Elias took note of table settings. The tablecloths were all white, and the centerpieces were simple, consisting of a slim glass vase with a mixture of blue and green flowers, no doubt to match Nightflash and Bookbinder's coats. A small orb of light drifted through the air, giving plenty of light to the room where the candles slacked. Overall, he thought it looked quite nice.
"Elias, are you alright?"
Nice Guy asked in a worried tone. He blinked and looked down at the Pegasus. "I'm fine. Why?" She frowned at him and turned to her saddlebags.
"You seemed out of sorts, and you don't seem to have noticed that you are bleeding."
Elias blinked stupidly at the mare. It took her less than a second to pull a handkerchief out of her bags. She hopped onto Elias's shoulders, then pressed the handkerchief to his nose. "I've got it," Elias said, placing his hand over her hoof. Nice Guy blushed lightly, but withdrew the limb. She pulled out a seat and tapped it lightly.
"Come, sit down. Let's see if we can get your nosebleed to stop before most ponies get here."
Elias took the offered seat, and Night Sky quickly placed her another chair. Hopping onto it, she tipped his head forward. Elias pinched the base of his nose, applying enough pressure to slow the bleeding. As he breathed through his mouth, Elias looked at the mare, staring at him with obvious concern. "What?" he said. "Are nosebleeds not a common thing for ponies?" Night Sky shook her head.
No, not unless the pony has an underlying condition. Nosebleeds are usually the first indicator that something is wrong. I assume things are different for humans.
Elias shrugged. "I wouldn't know, but I've had nosebleeds once or twice every year for a while now. Isn't anything special?" The Pegasus didn't seem like she believed him, but she did relax slightly. They sat in silence for a while, watching ponies stream into the reception hall without much interest. Most of them he didn't recognize, and they gave him curious glances in return, whispering about him whenever they thought his eyes weren't facing their direction. None of the whispers were anything hostile, however, just the casual gossip that normal people seem to indulge in. And since he was a different species, he supposed it was just par for the course that he would be looked at and whispered about. Elias scarcely peeled back the handkerchief to check if the bleeding had stopped, and after the third check, it had. The lights of the room dimmed as the ponies settled down, and music started to play softly. The bridal party entered the wedding hall, and while most of the ponies made their way to their table, Moonlit Night peeled off from her family. She made straight for Elias, making no effort to disguise her target. Elias felt Night Sky tense up at his side, and he briefly wondered if he ever told her of the reaction Night Flash's mother had in his presence. The blue unicorn wove through the crowd before coming to a stop just before Elias. Her expression was closely guarded, and even though he had a great deal of experience with reading emotions, her face was a blank slate. She had a better mask than Luna did. Night Sky cleared her throat.
Good evening, General Bright.
Elias gave her a nod. "Mrs. Knight, enjoying your son's wedding?" The unicorn snorted.
I should be asking you a similar question. You're a guest here after all.
She glanced at Night Sky.
Hello, dear. Enjoying your date with General Bright?
Night Sky's muzzle twitched with irritation.
Indeed. But for tonight there is no General. It is merely Elias here with me.
Moonlit Night nodded slowly at her words and looked back to Elias. The human regarded her carefully, keeping his face blank. They stared at each other for a moment, then Moonlit Night sighed and stared at the floor.
General.
She paused to take a deep breath, then met his gaze.
Elias. I came over here because I wanted to apologize. And to thank you.
"Thank me for what?" Elias asked. "And save your apology. You were trying to protect your family from what you viewed as an external threat. While I didn't appreciate your words, I understood your actions after some reflection." Moonlight Night scuffed the floor with her hoof and sighed again.
And that is doubly so the reason why I have to apologize. I thought you were some kind of immature threat that was going to make my Flashy act rash and immature. But even now you act like any Negro stallion would. In fact, I would go so far to say that you're more mature than many stallions twice your age. So,
She continued.
I am sorry. I should not have treated you as I did. And for what it's worth, I am glad that you've become so close with Night Flash and Bookbinder. All of their talk has been about you, and if they have faith in you, then I can't go against them.
Her mask slipped, and a genuine smile appeared on her face.
And I want to give you my sincerest thanks for rejecting Shooting Star's application. I know Night Flash wanted to work with his brother, but knowing that at least one of my sons would be safe at home is... well, it's a gift that any mother should cherish. Thank you, General Bright. From the bottom of my heart, thank you.
She shuffled shyly, then extended a hoof for a hug. Elias would have laughed at the strange smile on her face, but some part of his mind whispered that it would make Night Flash happier if he got along with his mother. Elias leaned forward and embraced the mare, and the awkwardness in the air became stifling. Unlike every other hug he had with ponies, Elias couldn't tell when it was supposed to end. It seemed that neither did Moonlight Night. After a few seconds of awkwardness, Elias pulled away and looked towards the dance floor, clearing his throat loudly. You're welcome, he said stiffly. I was just doing what I thought was right.
Right.
The blue unicorn shuffled in place for a moment, then coughed and nodded.
Right. Okay, I will go sit with my husband now, then.
He coughed again before trotting away, importantly not looking towards Elias. The human continued to look anywhere but other than moonlit night, and a snort drew his eyes. Night Sky held a hoof over her mouth, barely suppressing a giggle. Elias gave her a deadpan look. What? The disguised Alicorn threw her head back and laughed aloud.
What?
She said through her giggles.
What, he asks. Oh, by the keepers, Elias, you are too precious.
Elias flushed red with embarrassment and looked away. As he crossed his arms over his chest, Night Sky hopped out of her seat and flapped into his shoulders, resting her chin against his ear.
Oh, don't be grumpy,
She chuckled.
All ponies get nervous when talking with family. 'Tis simply the way of the world.
Elias grunted in response, drawing further chuckles from Night Sky. One of her legs kicked out and dragged her chair over so that she could permanently settle against him. The blue mare hummed in his ear, and he could feel her smile as her muscles instinctively began relaxing at his presence. The dancing floor lights flicked off, replaced by 2 spotlights twirling around the empty floor. An announcer's voice came through the speakers, and the lights focused on a curtain, from which a pair of ponies walked out of. Everyone cheered and applauded for Night Flash and Bookbinder, but for some reason, the Pegasus' eyes immediately locked on Elias. Like a fuzzy blue bullet, Night Flash leaped forward at breakneck speed, and Elias had no time to stop the Pegasus before he slammed into his chest and sent him smashing backward into the table. The clatter of breaking table and destroyed place settings were ignored by Night Flash as he snorted and snuggled hard against Elias' chest. After a moment of contemplation, Elias gave in and hugged the Pegasus tight. A slightly shorter episode than usual, but that's only because the next section is better taken in its full form, at least in my opinion. So I am excited to get to that. I don't know if that'll be the next upload or if I'll continue with the normal schedule, because I absolutely want to finish up this adorable marriage thing. We'll see. We'll see. However, what we also see is the kindness of my wonderful Patreons. Thank you, my tier 1s, Balance Kindness, Jason Master, Dreamless, Portal, Hyperlink, Jason, HK4K, Texture, Lord High, 9 Game, McConey, Pony Body Entertainment, Starly Blaze, Rainflicker, and Tyler Perry. My tier 2s, Captain Blue, Shadow, Chaotic Mist, The Animated Ghost, DJ Mix 2000, Elemental Wolf, H1 Wolf King, Potato 20, Mr. Crazy Deacon, Solar Comet, 212th Trooper, Mackenzie McCullough, Nocturne, Bubble Leonard, Redeemer Dark, Soul Eclipse, Sword Brother and Mordred, Artie Bryant, Rihanna, Dragon Wolf, and Steel Spark. A large thank you to my previous Titan tiers, Dark Guardian, Danish Dash, Maverick, and User 1482. 82? User 1842. Whoops, my bad. And a large thank you to my current ones, Biss Eclipse and Silent Titan. I appreciate you guys' support so freaking much, and it means a ton to me. That aside, however, this has been Firehearth. Have a wonderful day.